My whole journey of changing careers, making this extreme career change from the banking industry to now creating my own content, it has been a journey of overcoming my biggest challenges and especially my biggest flaws, and that's something I will talk about later. How long did it take me to get from banking to now becoming a content creator? And my answer might really surprise you because it took a very, very long time. It took me almost 10 years to go from banking, from being a project manager, working in strategic business management in banking, handling projects, to now working totally on my own and making my own content, managing my own time, having this flexibility and so on. But what might also surprise you is that it's not like I used to work in banking and then one day I had this revelation that, oh, I want to become a content creator. And by the way, at that time, the concept of content creator didn't really exist yet, that job, that occupation. So it was never the case that during my time in banking, I had this inspiration that, okay, I want to become a content creator, and then fast forward after 7-8 years or so that happened. So that was not the case. So what happened was that in between these 2 points, banking, content creation, or YouTuber, if you will, there were so many changes, tweaks, and fine-tuning in between until I got to that point. And multiple times I would say I took the wrong turn, and I went like through a dark phase and asked myself, okay, am I on the right track? Is this really what I want, or do I have to look for another path? And on that journey, I felt that there was no one to hold my hand. There was not even anyone who would really understand me. I mean, my parents, of course, they had no idea what I was doing. They were perhaps really confused about, okay, what is she doing? She has this successful career in banking. Everything is going well. Now she's quitting her job and she's doing all these things. What is she up to, right? And I also didn't really find a good resource that could guide me through this process. And that is why, guys, I am so passionate about talking about these themes, how you can navigate this experience, how you can face your fears, face your doubts, and move on nevertheless, and gradually get to a more fulfilling and meaningful career. So banking, that was around 10 years ago. I had a career in banking for 5 years, and I was really, really successful at it. I was actually in one of these fast-track programs called a management trainee program, and in that program I had the possibility to progress very fast. So over the course of 5 years, I got promoted 3 times, and I got multiple salary increases, and I was even transferred overseas. At that time I was working in Indonesia, a country in Southeast Asia, and I transferred to Singapore within the company, and that was a very exciting phase. But anyway, I totally hated it. So this might maybe surprise you. This is what happened. There were some aspects of my work in project management that I actually liked. The part of it that I liked was to start new things. I was always excited of launching new projects, and that continued until this very day. But then again, there were so many aspects about banking that I just didn't like. I didn't like the working environment. I didn't like the industry. I was not the least interested in banking products, except for banking products for my own personal use. But I wasn't really interested in the industry, and I also didn't care much about all the red tape, about all the complicated processes. And at the same time, I always had to work with so many people at the same time, and that just didn't gel with my personality, which is I would say an extreme introvert. This working environment was just not for me. As you can see, there were so many factors that led to me really, really not being happy, not being fulfilled in this working environment, in this career, and I knew that I had to get out of this. But the big problem, something that you guys might also be facing at the moment, is, okay, I do not want this. I do not want A. I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to get out of this mess. But where do I want to go next? What do I want to do instead? I mean, I can't just leave my job and then be in limbo and then do nothing, right? I have to have a plan. So that's where a very long phase of introspection, contemplation began. And I processed all my thoughts, my feelings by journaling. So if you have a lot of things on your mind at the moment and you don't really know how to process these things, I would really, really recommend to you to start journaling. I mean, of course, you can talk to someone, you can talk to a therapist, you can talk to a friend, you can talk to a family member, but they will only have so much time for you. So in the beginning, it will feel like a really big mess, but over time, you will recognize recurring patterns in your journal, and you will be able to crystallize what you actually want to do with your life. Actually, that's also something that I talk about in very much detail in my book. So once that book comes out, if you get it, that might be able to help you to process your thoughts and to navigate this very complicated journey. As a result of that, I discovered something about myself that has long been buried in my subconscious, perhaps. I revisited the idea of starting acting again. So this was actually not something new. Acting was something that I really loved to do as a kid, as a teen in school. I was part of the school drama, I participated in performances, and I really loved it. And I think when I was around 14, 15, I really had this dream of becoming an actress and pursuing acting. But I don't know what happened during my teen years. Suddenly I just forgot everything about it and I just didn't revisit again. When I graduated from high school, the question was then, okay, what should I study now? And for a very brief time, I considered to study drama, theater, but somehow I never really took that seriously. Somehow it just didn't ring serious or solid enough to me. And I also had a feeling that my parents wouldn't be very supportive of it. So they didn't say it, but because I assumed it, somehow I combined all these impressions, and in the end I told myself, no, I'm going to study economics. I didn't know where that came from. It just sounded really good to me. It sounded like something stable. It sounded like something in which I could get a job after graduation, something prestigious. So I went for that. Fast forward, I got into banking. I spent 5 years in banking, and you know the rest of the story. So back to that hunch about acting. So after about 3 to 4 years in banking, I revisited my dream of doing acting. And that was the first time that I actually took it seriously. I thought, okay, I'm now in my end 20s. I've had a career that I don't like, that I actually hate. And now I have a choice. Do I want to continue making these kinds of decisions that lead to success, to a successful career as in the eyes of other people? Something that sounds prestigious but is actually really not important to me, that I don't care about? Or am I going to make my decisions differently now? Am I going to make decisions in a way that is meaningful to me, although it might be riskier? And I decided for the second option. I thought that, okay, you only have so many years to live, and you cannot keep postponing everything that you really want to do to the future, because at some point, when you're in your 70s and your 80s, you can't postpone things any further, and you will just end up with a bunch of regret. And that was something, guys, that I was most afraid of. I never ever wanted to experience that kind of regret. So I told myself, okay, if I want to do acting, although there's a big risk, I need to do it now. So that's what I did. And I know it sounds crazy. And it also didn't happen, immediately. So what I did after that was I signed up for an acting course, and I went to that acting course every evening on every Wednesday for I think 2 or 3 months. And it was held by NYU Tisch in Singapore for about 3 hours at a time, and I really had a blast. I had so much fun, and when doing that, I really felt alive. I really felt like a different person. I just can't describe to you what kind of feeling that is. So if you've ever done something, if you've ever been absorbed in doing something or a specific kind of work or activity where you just feel so alive, so energetic and focused, then you know what I mean. And one thing led to the other. So after doing that acting course, I did some student film projects. I acted in those student films. I think there were perhaps around 10 projects or so. And I started to really get into it. And doing that kind of like testing and experimenting with acting without fully committing to it, without leaving my day job, that really gave me the confidence that, okay, there's something in this. There's something right about following my interest, following my passion. And by the way, guys, following my passion doesn't mean that you'll end up doing work around your passion necessarily, but at least you need to give yourself a chance to follow that passion and see where it leads. I really had a good feeling about it, and I knew that I had to take serious action. I didn't want it to just be a hobby and continue to live my life as a banker during daytime, right? So I concocted a plan to quit my job within the span of, I think, about 1 year or 1.5 years. So I did a lot of very detailed planning during that time, particularly related to my finances. So I calculated in much detail how much money I wanted to have when I quit my job, and how I would be going to save up that money and so on. And then the day came and I finally quit my job. For a few years, what I did was I did some acting and some student projects, but also in an actual feature film in Indonesia, and also in a web series and so on. And on the side, I also pursued entrepreneurship. I started my own small businesses. I'm not going to go into detail what kind of businesses these were, but all that I can say is that there were some successes and some failures, but overall more failures. So I launched several small businesses, and I made my money back, and I broke even. I sold some products and services related to home apparel, but overall I would say, I have to admit that it was a failure. It was not at all how I imagined it to be. I imagined that, okay, I would quit my job, start my business, and then I would start earning all this money and would live happily ever after. But that is absolutely not what happened. So I invested my money, I made my money back, but I didn't make a penny more. So I was kind of back at square one, right? So now what? It was really challenging that time. So don't think, guys, that it's just as easy as quitting your job and just following your passion and everything will turn out right. That's not at all how it works. So I had to go through a lot of dark times and self-questioning. I had times where I really doubted my decision. Like, was it really the right decision to quit my job in banking? I had a really nice income. I earned a fat bonus each year, and now I'm left only with my savings, and I don't really know what I'm doing, right? But one thing led to the other with the acting thing, and in the end, I ended up making my own films. I started off making short films, and then I actually made 2 feature films. One was launched in theaters in Indonesia, while both of them were sold to an OTT online platform in Indonesia as well. So how did it come to that point? The reason that I started making films was that I didn't see much success as an actress. I didn't think that I was such a bad actress, I must say, but the odds are simply against you in that business. If you're not 100% dedicated, if you're not willing to do anything to get a role and really be on the ball and go to hundreds of auditions, get an agent, and do everything that's in your power, then you can just forget it. You can just forget it. So acting is not something that you can just dip into and be half interested into. It just doesn't work that way. And it's the same thing with music. So I didn't have much success with acting in a commercial sense, I must say. And that is why I told myself, okay, if I really love acting and I want to have control over the process, if I don't just want to be a passive person waiting for someone to give me a job, then what I need to do is to make my own films. And I would say that at that point, that is actually where my content creation journey began. At that point, I was just not aware of it yet. I didn't think of filmmaking as content creation in that way. But now, of course, in hindsight, now that I'm creating content, I'm aware that, okay, no matter what kind of media I'm producing, what I'm doing is creating content. I'm using my creativity to create content for an audience. So at that point, I made these films, I decided to become not only an actor but also a producer so that I could control the whole process and also learn more about how films are made. I was so much into films at that time. I watched so many films and tried to study everything I could about films. And I just went on to find a director who I really wanted to work with, and I wrote a business proposal and I made a film. As simple as that. So that's one thing that was really beneficial to me. Something that I learned from my days in banking was how to write business cases, business proposals. So that came very easy to me, and that is also why I managed to get the funding to make my own films. So that was a really great experience. I would not say that it was a total success because financially the film was not as successful as I would like it to be. Okay, guys, at this point you might ask me, how did you manage to stay afloat all this while? I mean, how did you pay for your bills, your groceries, etc., right? So that's another story. I don't want to get into too much detail about that because it's just too much detail for this episode. But in short, I can tell you that I managed to stay afloat through a combination of a bit of passive income, savings, and a bunch of freelance jobs. Like I did some translations, I did some gigs, and so on. So I'll get into that in another video if you're interested about that, if you're interested about how you can make a living while you are pursuing something that you really want. Okay, so let's get back to the filmmaking. So this whole filmmaking journey took me around 3+ years, 3 to 4 years. And that was really, really exciting. And at that point, I thought, okay, all I want to do in the future is to continue to make my own films. This is just so exciting. And the only reason why I didn't continue to make films right after that was because making films, I realized that this was such a lengthy and exhausting process. I mean, I totally loved it. I enjoyed it so much. It was so fulfilling, but it was also so exhausting at the same time. It was just taking too much of my energy. So now I really understand when I look at all these great filmmakers like Steven Spielberg and so on, why sometimes it takes them so long to launch their next film. Because if you put so much energy into it, especially if you're very detail oriented, it will take you a long time to launch each project. So in my case, I thought that, okay, I personally just do not have the energy to make one film after the other. I need a break in between. And at that point, I started questioning myself as well. In that case, am I actually a filmmaker? Am I a filmmaker? Am I an actress? So it took a while to really reconcile this situation with my idea of what a career is. But now, guys, I must tell you that there is not only one way to have a career. It's not like you have to pick one career and then continuously stick with it until the end of your life. There are so many ways to have a career. If you're interested in many things, you can have several careers, and at different points in your life you can put your focus on different things, and you can even decide to perhaps, for example, pause this career because at the moment you want to spend more energy and more attention on this other career. So that's what happened in my case. So I decided for myself, okay, I'm at a phase in my life where I just want to halt this filmmaking process. I just need to process everything that has happened because this was also such a new experience to me. But I know that in the future I will make another film, but just not now. It's just not the right time. Because at that moment I was also busy preparing another big change in my life, which was moving to Canada. At that time I was living in Indonesia, but for the longest time I always knew that I wanted to live in a Western country. And that is also another story for another time, but basically what happened was that I and my husband, we spent about 1 or 2 years very intensively planning our move, our migration to Canada. We both applied for a study program in Canada. Fast forward, after 4 years after moving to Canada, we both got our permanent residence, and now I am in Canada. So in the beginning, when we arrived in Canada, it was in a way like starting from zero, and especially for me, because I was no longer in my banking job. I did not have a steady income. My income sources, I had multiple income sources, but everything really fluctuated, and I was in this new country and everything was new. I had to figure out everything. But surprisingly, in this moment of, I would say, emptiness, confusion, and doubt, I suddenly had this idea to make my first YouTube video. I started thinking and processing my whole experience about this banking, acting, filmmaking thing. And I thought that, okay, this was such a complicated journey, but this was so fulfilling. And I know that even though I'm not exactly there where I want to be yet, I am in a much, much better place than I was before. Despite all this chaos and this uncertainty and all these challenges and all this discomfort and fear that I was experiencing at that moment without having anything firm, I knew that I was so much happier, so much more fulfilled, and my life was so much more meaningful than back then when I was in that banking job that was so clear, so prestigious. And back then when I was in banking, I had no problem explaining to anyone who I was. Whereas when I first arrived in Canada, I felt like I was a nobody. If you'd ask me, who are you and what do you do, I wouldn't really have a solid answer to that. But that was exactly my inspiration to start my Multiple Careers YouTube channel. I thought that, okay, I'm in this much better place now, but I still have to sort out how this all connects and what my takeaways are. But there is so much that I can share with other people out there who are still in that place I used to be, where they feel stuck, where they feel lost, where they just feel out of place and want to improve their career, who want to change their lives and want to have a more fulfilling life. And I started making all these YouTube videos about how you can have multiple careers in a lifetime, how it's possible to change careers, how you do not have to stay stuck on one career path, and so on. And that was a super, super long journey. I would say it took me a very long time until I got monetized, until I got some traction, but I kept at it. And until this point on my main channel, Multiple Careers, I would say I've made over, I think, almost 300 videos. And after that, shortly, I also started my second YouTube channel, which is called Living in Canada. And on that channel, I also made around 100 videos, and I've got very, very good traction there. And I've also started this Multiple Careers podcast. And voila, all of a sudden, now I'm a content creator. And that happened gradually, guys. I mean, even the realization that I'm a content creator, that happened gradually. As I said at the very beginning of this episode, it was not like I was in banking and I thought, okay, I want to become a content creator. In fact, at that time when I was still in banking, I think it was in the 2010s or so, I already had a YouTube account. I didn't really have a channel, but you know that when you have an account, you can upload videos to it. And I just uploaded videos of myself, like singing karaoke and also auditioning for films. So I uploaded my audition tapes and so on. So I had a few videos up there, but I put them on private. But never did it occur to me that I could actually upload something for an audience to watch and make money out of it. And that was just out of this world. So that's just an example, guys, of how you can be so closed-minded if you don't intentionally try to open up your thoughts to all the possibilities that actually exist in this world. And that is exactly my intention with this podcast episode. By sharing this story of mine, I want to hopefully inspire you in some way to think of the other possibilities. If all this while you've been stuck in this one job, you've been working in this one job for a couple of years or 10 years or even 15 years, it might be so difficult to see a world beyond that because this is all you've known. You've been in this corporate job, you've been relying on this corporation to give you a career path and to pay you a steady salary. You've been so reliant on this that you cannot just leave this corporate mindset, this employee mindset, and fend for yourself and really try and go after what is really interesting to you in this life. I mean, isn't that all that we want to do? We want to do something that is interesting, that we're good at, and that we can hopefully also get paid for. I think that's something that most people want, but the least people really dare to go after. I must say that the reason that I managed to leave my banking job and change my careers and finally arrive at this point where I am a content creator and I'm really happy and fulfilled with what I'm doing is because I constantly questioned what I was doing. So that is really something that you need to do. If you're somewhere where you don't want to be, you have to constantly question where you're at and whether or not your decisions, the decisions that you're making, are actually aligned with what's important to you in your life. If you say that art is important to you, but every day you're actually working on stuff that doesn't matter to you, then you're totally misaligned. Then you'll never actually get to this point. So it doesn't mean that you make one decision and then boom, you arrive at a place where you want to be. It's just not how it works. Like in my example, as you heard, it took me so many years to go from banking to acting and filmmaking, and then from there transition to content creation and other things, and also writing the book that I'm writing. And that's a process that happens organically, and you can only advance, you can only improve your life and make progress if you continue to question what you're doing, and also very importantly, look at your flaws. Like ask yourself, what is my biggest flaw at the moment? Everyone has this big flaw, this blind spot that they might not realize is there, but that is hindering their whole process. For some people, that can be fear. I would say for most people, that's fear. And in fact, I actually made a podcast episode a few weeks ago where I talk about how you can overcome your fear when you want to change jobs. So many people have this big fear of making any change in their life because they're so used to their comfort zone. They're so used to the status quo, and they're so afraid of taking the tiniest risk. They're so afraid of failure. But if you do not take a risk, if you do not change the way you do things, you will never improve your life. Another flaw could also be that you are too attached to a certain image of yours. For example, like in my case, I used to be a banker and my title was VP, which was Vice President in Strategic Business Management. And no matter if that sounds interesting to you or not, most people would agree that this sounds like a very prestigious title. And my family members, my friends, and so they also found that, okay, that's something solid, that's something to look up to, right? But actually it doesn't mean anything. It's just a title that the corporation gives you to identify what kind of work you do, and also to give you a sense of pride, I would say, in what you're doing. But actually the title doesn't mean anything. The moment you lose your job, the moment you leave the company, then you are not that VP in strategic business management anymore. So my question is then, when you leave your job and when you're no longer in the company, then who are you? How do you identify yourself as? And the answer is that you need to find something else beyond your title and beyond that image. If you are too attached to a certain image that you are this VP or the COO of a company, then you can never let go of it, and you will forever be chained to that image, and you will never be able to make a decision that is aligned with your long-term purpose and with the things that are important. So guys, I think this was a quite long episode already, and there are so many more things that I can talk about, but I can't cover everything in this podcast episode. I would really love to hear your comments and your questions, and most of all, I'm really curious to know where you are right now in your journey. Are you happy? Are you fulfilled in your job, in your career? Is there anything that you want to change? What are your plans? Where would you ideally want to go? And also, what are your biggest obstacles? What are the challenges that you're facing in the moment? Why is it that you cannot make this career change? Why is it that you cannot leave your job and you're stuck in it? Please do let me know in the comments below, and I will try my best to either respond to your comments or perhaps even make another video about that. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I wish you all the best in your career, and I will see you in the next episode.